It would seem that Michael Franzese is unfortunately following the footsteps of his father.
You are the youngest, richest Mafia Don in the United States. It's absolutely untrue.
You know, the mob is not a business, it's a way of life. It's a whole subculture from everything else that exists. And when you take that oath, you got to be in it all the way, body, mind, and soul, or you don't survive. You know, I walked into a room and the boss, cut my finger, some blood dropped on the floor. I cupped my hands. He took a picture of a saint, the Catholic altar card, put it in my hands and lit it aflame. And he said, "Tonight, Michael Franzese, you are born again into a new life until La Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours. Violate what you know about this life, betray your brothers, and you will die and burn in hell like the saint is burning in your hands." That's the oath. So, I mean, I took that very seriously back then. It was an idealistic view I had of being part of that life, part of what my father was part of. We were bound, in blood in another way. In that life, you got to play by the rules or you don't survive. So, my dad brought me up that way, and I had the best teacher in the world as far as I was concerned. My father schooled me in that life and how to, not only survive, but, then on my own I prospered. So, there were times when I was upset with some of the things that went on, but you don't voice yourself at that point in time. You keep your mouth shut. But I saw a lot of things in my 20 years in that life that I knew were just not right.
You are the youngest, richest Mafia Don in the United States. It's absolutely untrue. You're not the youngest or richest, or?
I'm not anything as far as organized crime, mafia. It's all untrue.
Now, Michael, you moved up in the ranks pretty quickly in the life of organized crime, the Columbo family. You became known as the prince of the mafia, literally making hundreds of millions of dollars, until there was a business venture that was in the film industry. This someone you met is where your love for her became more powerful than your love for your dad and the mob oath. Explain that.
Well, I had enjoyed some success in that life, obviously, and I was appointed a captain of capo regime, and I became a major target of law enforcement. I was indicted several times. I had 2 federal racketeering cases, one brought on by Rudy Giuliani at the time.
At least according to this complaint, it would seem that Michael Franzese is unfortunately following the footsteps of his father.
And so, I was doing well because I was beating all these cases. I was winning, and I was making a lot of money. And they were grooming me to be the boss or the underboss at one point in time. And then all of a sudden I make this movie, and I meet this young girl on the set, and I start to fall in love with her. And she was a young Christian girl, and her mother was a very, very devout Christian. Now, honestly, their faith, I wasn't buying into it, but I respected them because I saw how real it was to them. And then what happened, I'm starting to fall in love with this girl and I want her in my life, but I'm saying, my life is a direct contradiction to what these 2 women believe. How is this going to work? And honestly, I didn't understand what was happening at that point, but my love for her was becoming stronger than the blood oath that I took, stronger than this lifelong bond I have with my dad, that I really wanted her in my life. My mother-in-law would tell me, "Wife, you have to surrender to Jesus." And I said, I'm a mob guy. What do you mean surrender? God helps those who help themselves. I couldn't process that part of it. And it was really one fateful night for me when it was the first time in my life I ever experienced hopelessness. And I can tell you right now, it's the worst emotion, as far as I'm concerned, that you can ever experience. And I've felt everything from ecstasy right down to grief. But I was broken. And it was because I had, as part of my exit strategy, I had accepted a plea, got a 10-year prison sentence. I did 5 years on the 10. I got out, I was on parole, violated my parole and went back in. And the government was very upset with me. They were trying to turn me into a major witness and I was resisting. So when they violated me and put me in, they really, really took everything I had. And that first night in that jail cell, I was in the hole, 6 by 8, and I was just afraid of the loss of everything dear to me. I said, my wife, she waited for me 5 years. She was 21 years old when we got married. 13 horrible months on parole. We really had a rough time. People after me. It was tough. I said, we had 2 little babies. Now I'm back in prison. She's 27 years old. I'm going to lose the girl I did all of this for. And I said, they can't put me out on the yard, contract on my life. When I walked away, my own father turned on me at that point. And I said, and the feds are never going to put me out on the yard because they're going to not take responsibility if something happens to me. So I said, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in this 6x8 cell. At the age of 39, I'm done. It's over. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have an answer. And you know, it was just the fear of the loss of everything that was dear to me. And it was a prison guard that slipped a Bible. He came by my cell. He said, Franzese, you don't look good. You know, he looked in, and I said, get away from me, man. Of course I don't look good. I don't want to see any of you guys. I chased him. Came back about a minute later. He pushes a Bible through the slot on the door. It fell on the floor. I heard this thump, and actually I saw the Bible. I got mad. I jumped off the cot, picked it up, slammed it against the wall. And then I said to myself, you know what? I believed in God. I said, there's only me and God in this cell. I got nothing but enemies tonight. I don't need another enemy. And I picked up the book, and it was the first time in my life that I just looked up at that cement ceiling, and I said, God, if you're really up there, give me something to make me feel better, because I can't deal with this. I'm having a hard time. And, you know, I didn't know how to read the Bible. You know, in Catholic school, we read the catechism. We don't read the Bible. The priest reads it from the pulpit on a Sunday. So I'm holding the Bible. It just falls open to the book of Proverbs. And I started reading Proverbs, and this becomes a long story. So all I can tell you is it was that night that I challenged God. I really said to him, God, I trusted my father. I took a blood oath. I said, I've made 2 bad decisions. Look where it got me. I said, I can't accept you at this point in time. You got to prove it to me. You got to show me evidence. And evidence was obviously a major part of my life. And that's when the things started to happen to me that night. Now, it didn't happen overnight. I spent 3 years in a hole, 6x8 cell, 24/7. Very, very difficult, no matter what anybody tells you. I learned through that experience we weren't meant to be solo. We were meant to be social creatures. But during that time, I don't know if there's anybody on earth that studied the Bible as much as I did, because I had nothing but time on my hands, 24/7. I had my wife send me in more books on every religion that you could imagine, and I studied every faith. And I just came out of there after 3 years believing that the Bible was God's word and Jesus was my risen Savior.
Michael, prayer is important for a follower of Christ, and you say if it wasn't for the prayers of your wife and your late mother-in-law that you wouldn't be here today. And why is that true?
My mother-in-law was the most godly woman I ever met in my life. Very simple woman, never hit me over the head with the Bible, but she was a prayer warrior. She believed so strongly in the power of prayer, and that woman prayed for me day in and day out from the first time she met me. And I believe she prayed me to where I am. I mean, I was sitting in a room with her. I had just met her. And out of nowhere, she had a prayer book. And she used to put names in the prayer book, and she didn't even have to know your name. The boy on the street corner with one shoe. Just if she thought you needed prayer, it goes in the book, and she'd sit on her little porch, because they weren't wealthy at all, and she'd pray. And early on in my relationship with her, I was sitting with Camille. We weren't married yet. And she looked at me and she said, you know, I have a feeling that you're going to be preaching to millions of people. You're going to be sharing the gospel with millions of people at some point in your life. And I looked at her like, you know, is this woman on crack or something? I mean, I thought she was nuts. I looked at my wife. My wife, I never forget, she wasn't my wife yet, but she said, Ma, please don't scare him. I'm hoping for a Bible study, maybe church on Sunday. And you know what my mother-in-law's answer was? I'll never forget. She said, why would you limit the power of God in anyone's life? I'm going to pray for this man every single day. And it became so evident to me over the past 20 years that if God didn't have a different plan and a purpose for my life, I wouldn't be here. I'll give you some information that should open the eyes of people. The night that I got made, I took the oath. There were 6 of us that night. I'm the only one alive today. None of those 5 men died of natural causes. Every one of them were murdered. We had a big war in our family in the early 90s. I think 13 guys got killed. About 29 went to jail for life. I'd have been in the thick of that. Aside from that, Fortune magazine, 1986, they write this big article, 50 biggest and most powerful mob bosses in the country. They actually had a chart with the 50 of us on there. I was one of the 6 guys that they featured. I was number 18 on the list. I was 5 behind Gotti, my friend at the time. I was the youngest guy on the list. And I thought that was a silly list. How did they, you know, they didn't ask for our tax returns. But what isn't silly about that list is some 31 years later, out of the list of 50, 47 of those men are dead. 2 of them are doing life in prison without parole, and I'm here speaking to you. And I could have been one of them for sure. But God had a different plan. He navigated this course for me, and nobody can tell me any different. And I believe it with all my heart.